I mean, this is age appropriate for either high schoolers, because there's some big ass high schoolers now,
Oh, yeah.
or kids in first grade. Is you line up on that wall, teacher's the first one, all the kids are lined up with her along that wall. Very few, I'm talking very, very, very few percentage of the shooters, except for the one in LA and the Sikh temple shooter, were actually tactically trained.
Right.
What we're getting from a lot of the survivors is these guys are leading with that arm, with the gun in that hand coming through the doorway. So we teach the teacher, to grab that arm and start attacking the person. Meanwhile, the kids are on single file line, lined up on that wall. They file right outside the door. So
see, to me, that makes sense. I mean, you've got your cover. You know, you're attempting to control the situation, and you're getting, you know, the friendlies, so to speak, out of the way as quickly as possible. And that to me just sounds common sense, really.
Yeah, and you're getting targets out of the room. If they're not there, you can't shoot them. So if we get kids to huddle under desks, well, shit, you know, you can't do anything about it.
I like it. I absolutely like it. And so, how does your training, you know, differ between the angles you go from? I mean, from law enforcement to corporations and everything. Obviously, you have two target audiences that couldn't be more different.
Yeah.
How do you find that common ground, and, you know, how do you get basically the everyday average person out there to relate to that sort of mentality?
So the law enforcement training is more of the tactics of threshold evaluation, hallway clearing, room clearing, incident command management, more of the response, single officer response. How do I clear a hallway and keep my 540 degrees of security, which is, that sounds funny to military people because we're always taught 360, right?
Right.
So we do 540, the 360 around you, and then the 180 up and above. And teach them that, you know, how do I keep my security by myself, single officer response? Well, and we teach them how to snake hallways and do different things as far as clearing and approaching the bad guy and, you know, actions afterwards and all that, where the civilian training is the response options of how they respond unarmed. So it's two different trainings. One's armed in tactics, one's unarmed and just, you know, avoid, deny, defend. And then I also do a training as well that's called active shooter response for the CHL holder, for the concealed handgun license person.
Oh, that'd be a fantastic course.
Yeah, it's cool. I teach people how to do proper threshold evals on doorways, how to engage from, you know, if you're in an engagement, there's three places you can get into an engagement inside the building. It's either the hallway, the doorway, or the room. Well, the first place you want to do that from is the hallway, because now I have points of cover and I can move and slice and do different things. So I teach them all that and go through this, and when's the right time to deploy your gun, when is not the right time to deploy, what happens if you do deploy it and you can take down the suspect, and then how to respond when law enforcement arrives. So it's a cool course. People really seem to like that. You know, especially that I'm in Texas and everybody has a gun, so they like going through that course. So it's a good one.
I dig it, absolutely. And again, it's all about, you know, training and being prepared. And you know, you mentioned earlier, you know, you don't want the first time you have to do something to be when it actually happens. And I'm just curious here, when you're dealing with especially civilians, what are the most common things that they're worried about, or do you see any you know, myths or assumptions, I guess, that they normally operate with?
Oh, wide range, because you have the people that are. It just depends. I mean, with the United States as it is very sensitive to this subject. You know, we like our safe places now. Our timeouts if you get stressed. Yep. So you get a wide range of comments during classes of people who are like, hell yeah, this training's awesome. I want to defend myself. I know now how I can help my family. To some people that just go, well, this isn't going to happen to me, so this is worthless. And it's like, okay. So
yeah, I mean, just like the military, you're always going to have some folks doing training that just don't want to be there. And
Yep.
It kind of sucks. And, I've done a lot of training in the military side, especially on the medical side of the house. And, we see that all the time. And you kind of get used to it, and you kind of have to respect that, I guess. Now, you mentioned earlier that you do some medical training in these response situations as well.
Yeah, so it's actually cool because a lot of the people I end up working with are school nurses.
Mm-hmm.
So I really dig that because, they are going to be the ones at point of injury.
Right.
So, EMS, when one of these incidents happen, EMS isn't coming in. And you said you were EMS, right?
Yeah, I was an Army medic for a long time, and then when I got out, I worked as a civilian paramedic, yeah.
Okay, so you guys aren't going into a hot scene. You can't go in until it's deemed cold.
Correct.
So sometimes it may take 45 minutes until EMS gets in there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that doesn't help me because in most penetrating trauma stuff, as you know, I need to be to my next level of care within 1 hour, especially if the injury's in a non-compressible area, like the torso, the chest, abdomen, stuff like that. So if I'm not getting there, if paramedics aren't even coming into the building for 45 minutes to 50 minutes, sometimes we've seen it takes over an hour in a lot of active shooters for paramedics to get in there. Well, then we're starting to lose life on people. So we need to treat people at scene that are inside to treat their own. And it's cool. You see a lot of corporations starting to go, you know what? I'm going to do that. I'm going to start training 50 people that are spread out throughout the building to respond medically if something happens, and I'm going to start purchasing trauma bags. And they do it. So it's kind of interesting. But, yeah, it's a lot of wound pack, tourniquets, pressure dressing. It's almost like an abbreviated TC3.
That's what I was just going to ask you if that's the route you went, because I actually my last deployment I ran the training school for combat lifesaver. I did the whole course for everybody, and we changed a whole bunch of stuff, made it a lot better. And I've always said that civilians should get that sort of training. That's phenomenal. That's really, really good stuff.
Yeah, it's cool. And I went into the schools. And actually, we helped develop a program for one school, and it's going nationwide now. Mm-hmm. But, I went in there, and I talked to, they had like 90 nurses for this one independent school district. And only out of those 90, one nurse had trauma experience, and none of the others did.
Yeah, and
so
even in, just looking at the civilian world, having worked both angles of this, even civilian paramedics are not used to, unless you're, of course, inner city and things like that, but most of them aren't exposed to that horrific trauma, that point of injury care like that. And especially a school nurse, they're used to you got a tummy ache, little Johnny, you can go lay down or whatever. I'm not taking anything away from them, but that's got to be a kind of a game changer for them, I would think.
It is. It's a completely different response. And yes, you get so used to dealing with, like you said, little Johnny has a tummy ache, and then all of a sudden you have, an amputation or huge penetrating trauma. It's kind of like, oh, crap, I haven't dealt with this in 15 years of nursing. What do I do?
Right.
So yeah, it's good training. I love it. I helped with a couple individuals with John Hopkins to consult on, the military had TC3. Mm-hmm. Civilians did a very similar thing, so we developed TECC. And all we did was take out the word combat and put in emergency. So it's tactical emergency casualty care.
Nice. Absolutely.
And that's pretty much what we're teaching them up to that standard. It's a great course, and people always walk away loving it. They end up doing like 20 to 30 tourniquet drills during class where they have to put tourniquets on themselves and then on their buddy and all sorts of stuff. So it's a good deal.
Nice. And you mentioned, training with school nurses and things like that. One of my listeners wants to know, is there any kind of training going on for the teachers who work in school districts that allow them to carry? Because it is starting to be a thing. It's few and far between, obviously, but there are a lot of schools out there that are coming on board and saying, hey, if a teacher is trained and they have a concealed carry, then they're starting to kind of allow that. Do you guys do any work with them?
We haven't yet, just because there's not so many around here that are doing it, because a lot of the schools around here all have their own independent school district police departments.
Right.
But no, you're right. More schools are catching on to that and starting to do it. And I think the more that do, the more schools will seek training. You know, I'm not for it. I'm not against it. I'm just kind of middle of the road. Well, yeah, this could be a good thing. I back it up completely if they get tons of training.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm all for it if they do tons of training, and they should.
And you know, that's pretty much where I fall on it too, because you know, again, it's that reaction, and you know, you mentioned these statistics about you know, law enforcement missing under duress and everything. This is exactly what they'd be facing, and without training, I mean, your a weapon is really useless. You know, you get to the spray and pray level of fire, and you're basically asking to be put down, I guess.
Yeah, and then the whole thing also is, you know, not just train them on engagement skills and stuff like that, but now weapons for attention. Because what if it's, you know, what if it's the 60-year-old science teacher that's carrying the gun, and there's a fight in the classroom. He goes to break it up, and that gun flops out of his pants. Well, now he just introduced a gun into a violent scene already. So how does he retain that weapon? How does he get that weapon back? How does he, you know, there's all sorts of variables that could go into that. And as long as schools are training for that and really considering the different variables, man, I'm good with it. I'm for it.
Nice. So, you know, one thing I talk about a lot on the show is, you know, the scary times we live in with all the, you know, global terrorism. There's a bunch of countries like Russia and China that are getting militarized. I mean, it's not a safe globe we find ourselves on. What sort of situations do you guys typically train for? Is it, you know, a terrorist type response, or is it more of like a, you know, disgruntled employee, or, you know, a school shooting, that sort of thing?
Tell you, it's terrorist. More with the law enforcement side, it's terrorist, because, you know, I'm not worried about the average police officer going into a room and, you know, dominating that room with a 17-year-old high school student.
Right.
It's what we're worried about, and what we teach and study on a lot, is the Mumbai style attack, which they did in Paris, and they recreated it again in Brussels, and it works, and they know it works, and they want to do that. And, you know, I tell people all the time when I'm teaching courses, especially in Texas, you know, geographically, what are we very close to? Well, Mexican border. Well, we know how easy it is to get people back and forth across that border.
Right.
And you can get the weapons, you can get the people, and we also know, it's no top secret thing, it's open source intel, that they catch extremists trying to cross that border on a monthly basis. So if they can get here, and we know we catch them, and we're smart enough to know that some got across, if they're here, they can get the weapons. All they need is the locations. So it's really just training to conquer those guys, because there are a lot of good, hardened international terrorists, because they've been fighting for years in different theaters. So we just kind of have to watch that, you know.
You mentioned the Mumbai style attack. Can you break that down a little bit for the listeners so they know what you're sort of talking about?
Yeah, Mumbai style attack is multiple shooters, multiple locations, pretty much happening at the same time, with gunfire and explosives. So it's the same thing they did in Paris, and then in Brussels, and they've been wanting to do one here. So the big ones you see that I'm worried about is either that, a Mumbai style, multiple attackers, multiple locations, or a Beslan style attack, which is a big siege in a populated area. So they did it in Beslan at a school with a bunch of Chechen terrorists. Yeah, but they could do that here as well.
Yeah, it was actually perfect, because I was just about to ask you what you feel, you know, would be the go-to mentality for an attack. Because I think most educators